What would you do if you saw a frightened little girl silently asking for help? Would you notice, or simply look away? In today's emotional and action-packed story, a kidnapped girl makes one desperate signal to a group of bikers and, what they do next, changes her life forever. This is a powerful story about courage, compassion, and how ordinary people can become heroes in the most unexpected moments. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this. Now, let's get started. Emma Carter was only 12 years old, but everyone who knew her described her as brave, kind, and unusually responsible for her age. She lived with her parents in a peaceful neighborhood outside Denver, Colorado, where tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and quiet parks made it seem like the safest place in America. Every weekday followed the same routine. She attended middle school, practiced the violin after classes, and walked the familiar route back home. Her parents trusted her because she knew the neighborhood so well and always checked in when she arrived. That Friday afternoon began like any other. Summer was just around the corner, and dark rain clouds drifted across the sky. Emma hugged her violin case close to her chest as a light drizzle turned into steady rain. She pulled up the hood of her jacket and hurried along the sidewalk, hoping to get home before the weather became worse. The streets were quieter than usual, with only a few cars passing by. As she reached a narrow stretch of road beside an empty construction site, she noticed a white cargo van driving unusually slowly. At first, she thought the driver was looking for an address, so she kept walking without paying much attention. But the van stayed beside her for several seconds, before suddenly stopping just ahead. The passenger door flew open. Before Emma could turn around or run, two men wearing dark hoodies and black masks rushed toward her. One grabbed her backpack while the other covered her mouth with a gloved hand. Emma kicked, screamed, and struggled with all her strength. Her violin case crashed onto the wet pavement, its strings snapping as it landed. She tried to bite the man's hand, but he tightened his grip and lifted her into the van. Within seconds, the door slammed shut. The van accelerated onto the highway, disappearing into the afternoon traffic before anyone nearby realized what had happened. Emma's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to panic. Her father, a former volunteer firefighter, had always taught her that fear could cloud judgment. If you're ever in danger, he would often say, keep breathing, keep observing, and never stop looking for an opportunity. Emma repeated those words silently as the kidnappers tied her wrists with plastic zip ties. They blindfolded her for a while before eventually removing it when they believed she had given up. The inside of the van smelled of gasoline and old cardboard boxes. Small cracks around the rear doors allowed tiny beams of sunlight to enter, giving Emma brief glimpses of the passing highways. The kidnappers weren't professionals. They argued constantly. "This is your fault," one snapped. "You said her father would be home alone." The other replied angrily. "It doesn't matter. Once we get the money, we'll disappear." Emma listened carefully, memorizing every word. She learned that they planned to demand a large ransom because her father owned a successful construction company. They seemed nervous and unorganized, which gave her a small amount of hope. Hours passed as the van traveled west into the Rocky Mountains. Rain gave way to clear skies, and the roads became quieter. Emma carefully tested the zip ties around her wrists. They were tight but not impossible to move. Every bump in the road loosened them just enough to make her believe she might eventually escape. Late in the afternoon, the van pulled into a roadside gas station surrounded by tall pine trees and distant mountain peaks. One kidnapper stepped out to buy snacks while the other filled the fuel tank. Emma remained in the back, pretending to be exhausted. Through the dusty rear window, she noticed something unusual. Nearly 24 motorcycles rolled into the station together. Their chrome reflected the sunlight as the riders parked in neat rows beside the pumps. Most people would have crossed the street to avoid them. Their leather jackets, heavy boots, and serious expressions made them look intimidating. Across the back of every jacket was the same patch, **** Iron Riders Motorcycle Club. The kidnappers noticed them too. "Those bikers look rough," one muttered. "They're none of our business," the other replied. "Just fuel up and let's get moving." Emma stared at the group. Despite their tough appearance, she remembered something her father had once told her after meeting a charity motorcycle club during a veterans fundraiser. "Never judge people by how they look," he'd said. "Some of the toughest looking people have the biggest hearts." As one of the bikers happened to glance toward the van, Emma realized this might be her only chance. She couldn't shout, she couldn't open the doors, but she could send a message, trying not to attract the kidnappers' attention. She slowly raised her tied hands and pressed her palm against the dirty rear window. With one trembling finger, she carefully traced 4 simple words through the layer of dust. ****Help, I'm kidnapped. The biker froze for a moment. At first, he looked confused, almost as if he thought the frightened girl was playing a joke. But then he noticed the fear in her eyes. He saw the marks on her wrists where the zip ties had cut into her skin. He watched her silently shake her head. begging without making a sound. His expression instantly changed. Without alerting the kidnappers, he casually walked toward the leader of the group, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s named Jack Morrison. Jack listened carefully, glanced once toward the van, and immediately spotted Emma's desperate message still faintly visible on the glass. There, eyes met for only a second. It was enough. Jack gave a calm nod. "We're following that van," he said, quietly. No one questioned the order. The bikers climbed onto their motorcycles as if nothing unusual had happened. One by one, powerful engines came to life, their deep rumble echoing across the mountain valley. They waited until the kidnappers pulled out of the gas station before easing onto the highway, several car lengths behind. Emma watched through the rear window as the line of motorcycles appeared one after another. For the first time since the nightmare had begun, hope replaced fear. She didn't know who these bikers were, she didn't know if they could save her, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone had seen her, and they hadn't looked away. The white cargo van merged onto Interstate 70, weaving through the afternoon traffic as it headed deeper into the Colorado mountains. Inside, Emma sat quietly in the back, pretending to be frightened into silence. She kept her head lowered, but every few seconds she stole a glance through the narrow rear windows. The line of motorcycles was still there. They stayed far enough behind not to attract attention, but close enough that Emma could recognize the familiar leather jackets. Relief washed over her, yet she knew she couldn't celebrate. If the kidnappers noticed the bikers following them, they might panic and do something reckless. In the lead motorcycle, Jack Morrison remained calm. He had spent years riding across the country with the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club, organizing charity events for veterans, children's hospitals, and disaster relief. He had also served in the U.S. Army before becoming a mechanic. His instincts told him the terrified girl's message was real. Nobody acts like a hero. Jack spoke through the helmet intercom. "Keep your distance. Mike, call 911. Tell them we've got a possible child kidnapping. Give them our location every mile." Mike immediately reached for the hands-free communicator mounted inside his helmet. 911. "What's your emergency? We're following what appears to be a kidnapped child in a white cargo van heading west on Interstate 70. Colorado license plate." Mike carefully read the numbers aloud. "The girl signaled us from inside. She has restraints on her wrists." The dispatcher took the report seriously and immediately alerted the Colorado State Patrol, nearby sheriff's deputies, and local police departments. Officers began moving toward the highway from several directions. Meanwhile, the kidnappers remained unaware. One of them glanced into the side mirror and frowned. "Those motorcycles still behind us." His partner shrugged. "It's Colorado. People ride motorcycles everywhere." Still, something didn't feel right. The driver accelerated, weaving between slower vehicles. The bikers matched the speed without getting too close. Emma noticed the driver's nervous behavior. She realized they might soon understand they were being followed. Looking around the van, she searched for anything that could help rescuers identify their route. She quietly knit down the loose zip tie against a sharp edge of a metal toolbox bolted to the floor. It didn't break, but it loosened just enough for her to move one hand. Slightly. Her heart raced. Every small victory mattered. The highway climbed higher into the mountains. Before turning onto a less traveled county road lined with thick pine forests, the scenery became isolated. With fewer houses and almost no passing traffic, Jack noticed the change immediately. "They're leaving the main highway," he warned over the radio. "State Patrol says they're 8 minutes away." Mike answered, 8 minutes is a long time if they're taking her somewhere." The bikers maintained formation. 2 riders stayed behind the van, while others spread out, making it look as though they were simply enjoying a scenic mountain ride. Inside the van, the kidnappers finally became suspicious. "I told you they've been behind us since the gas station," the passenger growled. The driver checked the mirror again. "They're definitely following. What do we do?" "Take the old logging road." The van suddenly turned onto a rough dirt road, throwing rocks and dust into the air. Several motorcycles slowed but continued after it without hesitation. Emma nearly lost her balance as the van bounced violently over deep ruts. She could hear branches scraping the sides of the vehicle. The kidnappers argued louder with every passing minute. This wasn't part of the plan. Just shut up and drive. After several miles, the dirt road opened into an abandoned lumberyard surrounded by rusting equipment and empty warehouses. The driver slammed on the brakes. "They're still coming," he shouted. The kidnappers jumped out of the van, one pulling out a handgun while the other yanked open the rear doors. Emma instinctively backed into the corner, terrified but refusing to cry. "Get out," one kidnapper barked. Before he could grab her, the sound of dozens of motorcycle engines echoed through the empty yard. The Iron Riders entered from the dirt road, spreading out in a wide semicircle. They didn't charge forward recklessly. Instead, they positioned their motorcycles carefully, creating a barrier between the kidnappers and every possible escape route. Jack removed his helmet slowly and stepped forward with his hands visible. "It's over," he called in a calm but commanding voice. "The police are already on their way. Don't make this worse." The armed kidnapper pointed his weapon toward the bikers. Back off. None of the riders moved. They remained calm, standing shoulder to shoulder without provoking a fight. Their goal wasn't revenge, it was keeping Emma safe until law enforcement arrived. Far in the distance, faint sirens began echoing through the mountains. The kidnappers heard them too. Panic spread across their faces. One looked toward the surrounding forest, calculating whether he could escape on foot. The other tightened his grip on the handgun, his hands shaking so badly that even his partner noticed. Emma realized the rescue was closer than ever. She silently prayed that everyone would make it through. The next few minutes alive, the abandoned lumberyard fell, eerily silent except for the low rumble of motorcycle engines idling. In a wide circle around the white cargo van, dust drifted through the afternoon sunlight as Emma remained inside the vehicle, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She looked from one kidnapper to the other, hoping they would surrender before anyone got hurt. Jack Morrison stood several yards away, his helmet tucked under one arm. Years of military service had taught him that staying calm could save lives. Behind him, more than 20 members of the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club waited without making a single threatening move. They weren't there to start a fight, they were there to protect a frightened child. The kidnapper holding the handgun pointed it toward Jack with trembling hands. "Stay back," he shouted. "We'll leave if you let us go." Jack kept his voice steady. "You don't want this to end any worse than it already has. Put the gun down. The roads are blocked, and the police are coming. Think about what you're doing." For a brief moment, it looked as though the man might listen. His shoulders sagged, and the barrel of the handgun dipped toward the ground. But his partner suddenly yelled, "Don't trust them. Grab the girl." The second kidnapper lunged toward the open rear doors of the van. Emma reacted instantly. She remembered the loose zip ties she had been working on during the drive. Using all the strength she had left, she twisted her wrists hard. The plastic tie snapped. Before the man could reach her, she shoved the heavy toolbox that had been sliding around the floor. It slammed into his knees, throwing him off balance. He crashed to the ground with a cry of pain. Emma jumped from the van and ran. "Emma, this way," Jack called. She sprinted across the gravel as fast as her legs could carry her. One of the bikers rushed forward and wrapped his leather jacket around her shoulders. Guiding her behind the line of motorcycles were several other riders formed a protective shield around her. The armed kidnapper panicked. Instead of surrendering, he turned and ran toward the trees bordering the lumberyard. At that exact moment, the sound of sirens filled the air. Colorado State Patrol cruisers and sheriff's deputies burst through the entrance from opposite directions, blocking every exit. Officers quickly took positions behind their vehicles and ordered both kidnappers to drop their weapons. "Police, drop the gun. Hands where we can see them." Realizing there was no escape, the armed man slowly lowered the handgun and tossed it onto the ground. His partner, still limping from the fall, raised his hands in surrender. Within seconds, both men were handcuffed without another shot being fired. Only then did Emma allow herself to cry. The fear she had held inside for hours finally came pouring out. A female deputy hurried over, gently comforting her while paramedics checked the marks on her wrist. Although she had bruises and was exhausted, she had escaped without serious physical injuries. Less than 30 minutes later, Emma's parents arrived after being escorted by police. Her mother ran across the gravel yard, tears streaming down her face, and hugged Emma so tightly neither of them wanted to let go. Her father followed moments later, wrapping both of them in his arms. "We thought we'd lost you," he whispered, struggling to hold back tears. "I'm okay," Emma replied softly. "They helped me." She looked toward the Iron Riders. Many of the bikers quietly stepped back, believing their job was finished. They hadn't stayed for recognition. They simply wanted to know the little girl was safe. Emma pulled away from her parents and walked over to Jack Morrison. "You believed me," she said, her voice shaking. "Everyone else could have ignored me, but you didn't." Jack smiled kindly. "It wasn't just me," he replied. "Every rider here made the same choice. We saw someone in trouble, and we did what anyone should do." News of the rescue spread quickly across Colorado and then across the country. Television stations praised the teamwork between the Iron Riders, the 911 dispatcher, and law enforcement officers. Reporters learned that the motorcycle club spent much of its time raising money for children's charities and helping veterans, surprising many people who had judged them only by their appearance. A few weeks later, the town organized a community celebration to thank everyone involved in Emma's rescue. Hundreds of local residents gathered in the park. Police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and members of the Iron Riders stood